I work the night shift at an assembly plant. Someone shit on the break room table. I only had 15 minutes to go when the intercom chimed overhead. The distraught and obviously frustrated voice echoed across long, dusty aisles. All employees report to the supervisor's office. Now the final tone made me uneasy, like I was getting sent to the principal's office. I checked the time on my phone. So preciously close to leaving, and now this. I wheeled my cart over to the nearest rack and started walking in the direction of the supervisor's office in the center of the plant. A repeating cycle of hell. Honestly, except with air compressors, i.e. girl, aren't you supposed to be gone by now? I heard the unmistakable voice of Hot Tuna and heard him jogging up behind me. We call him Hot Tuna because he's always microwaving tuna and broccoli on lunch. Hey, HT, yeah, less than 15 minutes, I said as he matched my pace. He was a big guy, huge into weights and carb cutting. He ran the test cell on the shift, mostly machines that were backlogged due to leaks or faulty wiring. Although he must have been hiding somewhere on his phone away from the cameras, because he clearly washed in his work area. Always something stupid with this place, I swear, he said as we came to an intersection in the racks and turned left. We were a skeleton crew on night shift, a slow expansion due to the company's recent boom in business. Something about a partner company blowing up, blah blah. There were 4 of us in total on the shift, 3 runs and a supervisor. Sounds like somebody fucked up bad, HT said, his phone going off. He dug it out and started clicking away at a text, nearly bumping into a pallet jutting out from the second shelf. The place was a mess. Yeah, just a shame I couldn't escape first, I groaned, wishing I was on my way to the time clock. Big Water. They call me Big Water because I always have a giant water bottle. It's a 1.75 liter. I cut caffeine 2 weeks ago and have been drowning my sorrows in aged 20 cents. It's not really helping. I'm miserable. My name is the only one that doesn't get abbreviated. Nobody knows why, but it's funny. Part-time. What did you do now? HT clapped him on the shoulder, the way a bear would bully a small child. Hey, I made it in today. At least. PT coughed as we weaved through a line of unfinished machines, large portables with their guts exposed. He chuckled shamefully, and we laughed. Let's hurry up and get this done so Big Water can get out of here. Just got PTO, HT said, motioning for the door. You're leaving early when? He gasped, scowling. 7. I grinned. Oh, fuck you. PT rolled his eyes. At least I earned the time, I shrugged. Fair. Beyond the machines was a little dusty shanty, an office erected in the middle of 2 different assembly lines. Seeing it made me feel nervous. There was no shortage of the usual antics in the shop, but the tone on the intercom. Somebody fucked up pretty bad from the sounds of it. The little shanty felt oppressive as we drew near, and I could feel the atmospheric oppression of someone higher on the totem pole. It was a uniquely dangerous vibe, especially for a non-union shop. All right, let's see what Piss Baby wants, and get you on your way. HT chuckled, reaching for the door. We call him Piss Baby because he's the supervisor. TB sat at one of the 3 desks in the little office, obviously furious and sweating. His eyes reflected the plethora of cameras from his screen, his eyeballs flicking from one to another like he'd catch something as we walked in. 'Twas the first to pipe up, "Hey boss, what's up?" The cutoff was swift and angry. All I can say is, are you fucking kidding me? I like to think I run a pretty loose leash. I'm cool with most of the shit I have to put up with, but this, I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know who in their right mind to pull this shit. The blatant disrespect, I can't even believe it. The atrocity to do something like this. Why, if I find out who, you'll be on the unemployment line faster than as if the vandalism and the fences and the ripped-up roadkill wasn't enough. You had to do this. Who did it? He turned to us, out of breath, flustered. A coyote or something like it had been burrowing under the fence that surrounded the property. It seemed to be happening at night, when there were way less people around, not to mention the roadkill carcasses left around company grounds that seemed like they had been played with before leaving them as a present. What's going on here? I asked, trying to be a voice of reason. TB scoffed and started clicking with his mouse, focusing and enlarging one specific camera angle, then zooming in, all on a live feed of footage. As good with the cameras. That's why they hired him, PT muttered under his breath. This, does anyone want to explain themselves? Anyone want to shine a light on this depravity? PB was irate, pointing to the screen that we all started to hone in on. The little flat screen showed the layout of the break room through the window of a camera stationed above one of the lines, zoomed in on a specific tabletop. On top of the table was a pile of what could only be described as shit. PB continued, spittle flying from everything syllable. I go to get some coffee, just some coffee, and what do I find? Shit, I found that one of our employees has shit on the table, a human being, on a place people eat, for God's sake. Why? He leaned back in his chair, exhausted. We all looked at each other. Then, without a word, HT leaned in and eyed it seriously. Yeah, that's definitely not me. If it was me, it would have been bigger. Much bigger. Probably this isn't a fucking joke. I had half a mind to call corporate tonight. Just imagine how that would turn out. We'd all be fired, PB fumed. Wait, you don't think one of us actually did that, do you? I asked, unable to look away from the mess through the camera's feed on the monitor. The more I looked at it, the nastier it got. Clearly someone was having a hard time properly digesting. Surely there has to be some kind of explanation, PT said, scratching his head, a stupid smile on his face. Look, I have PTO that starts in like less than 10 minutes. Can you just cut to the chase and tell us who did it? I'm sure you looked at the cameras. That's the problem. Whoever did it, with the footage, it gets all distorted. Someone fucked with it. I don't know which one of you did it. Maybe it's all of you. He looked at us one by one, his face flustered. It looked like smoke would billow from his ears at any moment. Well, that's obvious. A ghost did it, PT said, chewing his lip, right before he burst into laughter. HT only lasted 2 seconds before he joined in. Funny as it was, I couldn't help but look at the clock. 8 minutes. I still had to wash my hands and walk to the time clock. I should fire you both, BBC. If you fire them both, you'll be stuck cleaning it up. I'm out of here for the night. I tapped my wrist where a watch would have been had I worn one. PB groaned. I made my way to the door of the little shanty. Look, I don't have any evidence either of you did this, but I know one of you did. I don't know how you pulled it off, but you did. Ha. All I ask, if you guys get this shit cleaned up in time for day HT and PT chuckled, and PB stood from his desk, momentarily halting the amusement. "I'm serious. Get this mess cleaned up, and since she's leaving, it's up to you too. If you clean it up, I'll let it slide, but if I somehow find how one of you did this, I'm firing the hell out of you. Even you, Janice." I felt myself freeze at the door, my hand hanging just inches from the knob. PT coughed and cleared his throat. Her name is Big Water. It took everything in me not to snort. Something piss baby surely heard. Oh my God. That's good. That's so good. PT wheeze. "Dude, my fucking sides. His face, please tell me you saw his face. Man. Don't even care if I get fired," HT said. "Does that mean you shit the table?" I asked. More deranged laughter. "The I dash wanna dash go dash home dash and dash not dash p dash here dash kind dot dot. Like I said, it would be bigger." HT shrugged. "I don't even think with my wonderful diet of alcohol and pills I could produce whatever was on that table. Has either fucking with us or it was you," TT said, before stopping and looking at me. HT stopped as well, suppressing what looked like another booming laugh. Stop. The only thing I had backed up in me was the urge to get the fuck out of here. We parted ways, and selfishly I ducked into the women's locker room, ready to get change and out of there for the night. I changed quickly, feeling the agonizing fly of time at work against my precious minutes outside of it. I chalked it up to laughs being laughs, but as I left the women's locker room, I couldn't help but feel sick at the thought of it. I couldn't help but notice the signs of jagged bone jutting through the waist, or the sickly runoff of blood that secreted through the bile. "Take it easy, Big Water," HT said. "Yeah, have one for us," PT added. I returned the courtesy and said that I would and that they should too. But as I swiped my time card and hurried across the parking lot, I couldn't help but forget about the event altogether. Work seems grueling and important while you're present, but once you left the premises, or more importantly get to your car, the world you leave behind ceases to exist. I don't mean that heartlessly. It's the same for me as it is for everyone else. I couldn't help but think of the text as it played through my mind. Looks like PT left too. Haven't seen him, and the text was from Hot Tuna, but I canceled it out just the same. Readying my knife and fork, I assumed he had decided to leave after having to clean up the unexplainable mess. I didn't blame him, but I was surprised HT went through the effort to text me. It was something that happened quite regularly. Aside from the nights where there was a discovered shit in the break room, I put my phone on silent and continued the night like any other. The rest of my night moved in a smooth and sultry blur, one away from the chained anxiety of finishing a shift and watching the clock. When I awoke, I saw the building on fire. I had several missed calls, as well as a number of unnoticed text messages. The first was from Hot Tuna, one I vaguely recall seeing a glimpse of. Looks like PT left too. Haven't seen him since we cleaned the mess. There was a scream on the other side of the plant, and he ran off when I went to find the piss. His other messages were rushed fucked up compared to what he usually texted. "There's no one here. Someone shut the lights off. Him trying to find PB. You guys organize this." I felt a sickening feeling in my gut, seeing that as his last message. Someone shut off the lights and am lurking on the portable line. This place is a dump. Seriously, no fire department or anything. This place is TR. I frantically scroll through PT's texts to find the abrupt end. There was a string from my mom, but I ignored it after seeing the odd text from PB, an attachment that was still loading with several texts behind it. Just tell me who shit on the table, and it'll save your job. You're better than the others. Enough games, it's impressive. He'll give them that. But I won't stand for it. They're playing hard to get. But I know it's one of them. Don't leave me hanging here. You could maybe even get that office job you talked about. The lights are off. I don't know what you guys did. Knock this shit off. I can see it. Out of the corner of my eye, I can see it. The image buffer. Then I clicked on it, and my mind tried to make sense of the shape shown within the camera's blur. Whatever it was, it had been moving fast enough to barely register the security cameras, like a glimpse frozen between digital time and space. Caught in the frozen still was the image of something crouching atop the break room table, bowed legs to human and to canine, flexed as bloody shit rained down on the table below it. Protruding between the two was the gnarled snout of a dog or something like it, its teeth bared angrily, saliva trailing across them. He did say he was really good with cameras. Story 2. People go missing on the night shift. She tried to save me. It was my first night shift. Working extra at a gas station is pretty far from every boy's dream, but it pays the bills. I'd worked a few day shifts before, so I knew the place well enough. However, I'd never been left alone for the night shift before. This was the first time I'd be completely unsupervised. Jada, my supervisor, was about to take off for the night. She kept repeating the same instructions over and over. Then again, this place had huge turnover. Maybe she honestly forgot I wasn't that new. No phones, she urged. If you got a slow night, make yourself useful. Nod and smile. I decided to get the worst tasks out of the way early. Cleaning the bathroom, restocking the freezers, taking out the trash, checking the receipt rolls, watering the plants. Took me about an hour. It wasn't even midnight yet, and I was pretty much done for the night. I considered mopping the floor, but I figured I could save that for later. I'd been useful enough. I was on my 4th game of team fight tactics when I realized I'd forgotten my name tag. No big deal, really, but figured I might as well fetch it. The manager's office was usually locked, but tonight I had the keys to it. I opened the door and started going through the drawers. Didn't take long to find the name tags. There was an entire box of them. At first I thought they were all blanks, but as I started going through them, I realized they were all previous employees. Sure, this place had high turnover, but we were talking 100 people, easy. This was ridiculous, I admit. This is where I started asking myself some questions. During the day shift, there was always someone new. Someone being trained or interviewed. I had only been there for about a week, and I was already feeling like a veteran. The only people who seemed to be regulars were the managers, J. Kennedy and Alicia. They seemed decent enough, so why were so many people quitting? As I got back behind the register, I realized there was a customer outside. Literally just outside the door. I waved at them. There was something off. They were just standing there, but they were so close that the automated doors should have opened, and yet the door remained closed. It was a man, late 30s, scraggly beard, rough red shirt, bit of a chunky look with sunken, bloodshot eyes and a natural frown. He just stared at me. I waved at him again, but I got no response. "Can I help you?" I called out. Nothing. Not a blink. I pulled out a chair and sat down. The man stayed outside, looking in. I tried not to think about it, but it was bothering me. I couldn't see his car anywhere on the cameras, and he didn't seem to want anything. I couldn't tell if he was on drugs or just being weird. I gave him a few minutes, but he just stood there. Finally, I got up from my chair. "Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." He didn't seem to listen. He was a bit shorter than me, but he had a good 50 pounds on me. "It'd be trouble and a brawl. I don't want to call the police," I said. "Can I help you, sir?" I pulled out my phone and held it up for him to see. I dialed the number and held it up for him to see, but still nothing. Then my phone rang. Unknown caller. It was just past midnight. Without letting the unnerving man out of my sight, I took the call. "Yeah," I answered. "Please don't hang up." A voice on the other end said, "You're in danger, and I can help." I was getting nervous. I wandered back and forth, watching those bloodshot eyes follow me. "Who is this?" I asked. "I'm Angie," the voice responded. "I used to work there, same shift, same managers. I wanted to warn you. I'd seen an Angie tag in the box earlier, maybe even several." She sounded young and nervous as all hell. "In a few hours, something terrible is gonna happen," she continued, "and if you're not out by then, you might as well be dead." "What are you talking about?" "Look outside." I'd been looking outside this entire time, but I'd been entirely focused on this one man outside the front door from across the road. I could see more people, about a dozen, lumbering out of the woods. "I need you to leave," she said. "Just walk out. Nothing will happen if you just walk away. Nothing will come for you." Who are these people? What's gonna happen?" "I don't know what." "Look," she interrupted. "It is perfectly simple. Just walk out the door." Something in me screamed for me not to do it, that I shouldn't step outside and walk past these people. They felt malicious, and I couldn't put my finger on why. Still, I stepped up to the door. Leaving seemed like the obvious choice. Strangely, it didn't open. "It won't open," I said. "Hold on. They want to keep you in there. They don't want you to leave. They want you to stay and die." "Die?" I asked. "What do you mean?" I stopped my pacing. Something was wrong. Was I locked in? "Tell me exactly what is about to happen," I demanded. "Something is in there with you." Angie sighed. "It could be 5 minutes. It could be a few hours, but that thing in there is coming for you." "And what thing are we talking about?" "It doesn't have a name," Angie said, "but it'll leave you empty. It'll leave you like the people out front. But if I leave, it'll be okay." "Yes, that's what I'm telling you. Hold on, I'll check the back." I hurried out back to the employee entrance. I pressed down the cold handle, and the door swung open. Outside were another group of 4 people, 2 young men, an older woman, and a girl no more than 16 years old. They all stared at me. I couldn't tell if they were drawn to me or the store. I stopped short of stepping through the door. "Why do they come here?" I asked Angie. "They serve their master. They want the spoils." "What spoils?" "What I thought about it." She was talking about me. "Right," I said, nodding to myself. "I see. Are you at the back door? Are you there yet?" Yeah. "I'm here. Just walk out," she whispered. "It's not too late." I was just about to walk out when a thought hit me. Why would they lock the front door, but not the back? That didn't make any sense. If the purpose was to keep me here, they could easily barricade the back as well. Something dented up. The door is open, I said. Great, you can still make it. Why wouldn't they lock the back door, Angie? She hesitated, and there was a brief pause. If they're locking me in here to hurt me, why wouldn't they lock the back door? I repeated. I don't know, she said, but you have to trust me. They gave me the keys, Angie. They go everywhere. I can lock and unlock this door 100 times. What's going on? They don't usually do that. I closed the door and stepped back, for less pairs of eyes staring at me. Look, said Angie. I was the last person to leave. They fucked up. I found a spare key and got out before it was too late. Maybe they figured I'd warn you. Maybe they're trying to trick you. Sure, yeah, I chuckled. Convenient. I'm trying to help you, she cried out. Those things out there are to discourage you from going outside. They're harmless, but they're there to scare you. Can't you see it is all just a way for them to keep you in there? I got one person screaming at me to go outside, and no one telling me to stay. No locked doors, just plenty of fucking creeps staring at me. What am I supposed to believe? Fine, you want more proof? Call the police. Hang up and call them. I ended the call. There were 8 people out front now, all gathering outside the front door. I couldn't tell if they were trying to get in or if they were waiting for me to step out. I called the emergency services only to be met with silence. Not even a dial tone, just a blank nothing. I tried a few more numbers, my mom, my friends. I tried going online, but all I got was cached copies of sites I'd been to before. My background picture had changed to a black screen. But there was something else. Something had started to smell. The freshly stocked frozen goods had suddenly gone bad, and a stench was oozing out of the freezers. Our flowers by the counter had withered and died, all except the sunflowers, which turned a sickly blue. I wasn't getting through to anyone. Being inside was awful. The single-serving frozen meals were making me gag. I figured I'd go for the landline. As I got in the manager's office, I got another call on my phone, unknown caller. Looking back and forth between my phone and the landline, I weighed my options. I chose Angie. How are you getting through? I asked her. How do you know my number? I still got the email password. I just checked your application. But how come your number works? Everything else is down. I'm calling from a private network. She said they don't know there's a way in. I asked. I thought it was just one thing. No. They're working together. People don't just go missing without someone noticing. So there's like an intelligence behind it. A conspiracy. Yeah. People come and go in these places all the time. Are they paying you under the table? They figured it was sort of a trial, and no paperwork, no missing people, no records, just a box of name tags. It made sense in a way, but I needed more. I needed proof. There had to be something. Why didn't you call me earlier? I asked. You could have called me as soon as I got the job, or as soon as my shift started. I had to make sure Jada wasn't around. She said she would have tried to trick you. I'm not sure you're not trying to trick me. Why would I spend my time calling you from across the country just to have you fail? She screamed. If I was part of this, I would have just let you sit there with your goddamn team fight tactics and die. She went quiet. So did I. I counted my breaths as I looked outside. There were more of them now. How did you know what I was playing? I asked. She didn't respond. The silence hung in the air. "I'm asking you, how did you know what I was playing?" She was just as quiet as the man with the bloodshot eyes, still waiting for me outside the door. "You're watching. You knew I was alone. You knew I was getting antsy about the guy showing up outside." "Yeah," she sighed. "You tried to get me out as soon as he showed up. You tried to trick me before there were too many of them to scare me off. That's not." She sighed. I could hear heavy breathing. As I paced back and forth, I was getting ready to hang up. This was a trick. She was the one tricking me, clearly trying to get me outside to join those things. "I know this looks bad," she said. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm honestly just trying to help you." This time I was the one keeping quiet. I walked up to the door, studying the people outside. Blank stares, following my every move. I felt like a snake charmer, like they could snap out of it and tear me apart in the blink of an eye. As I said, "I have the passwords for everything. I'm the only one who knows them. I just wanted to give you the best shot at getting out of there. I hoped they wouldn't come tonight, but as soon as they did, I had to do something." "You're not being honest with me, ... I'm not lying. I'm just having a hard time explaining it. There's a lot of shit about this that all sounds completely insane. I don't want to throw you off the deep end. Give it to me straight," I demanded. "Tell me what the fuck is coming from me. It's not a thing. Like, not real. It's there. But it's just I don't know how to explain it. It just steps through. Steps through what? The world, the air, a ripple in time or something. It just steps in, and it's there. And then it shoves some kind of mouth spike into your head and gargles up something inside. A mouth spike. What the hell are you? Yes, a spike. And no, I mean it goes into your mouth. Doesn't have a mouth of its own. It just goes into you and gone. Game over. I didn't know what to think. My mind was a jumble mess, and I felt my pulse rising and falling. There were over 18 people outside in various states of disarray, all of them just staring at me. If I just step outside, I'd know for sure. What does it look like? Does it? The lights flickered. There was a loud hum, a buzz, and then an electric failure. One of the fluorescent lights burned out, while the others just slowly dimmed to nothing. This was real. It was make or break by this point. Something was happening. The lights went out. I whispered, "Is this now?" Angie screamed, "Get out." Now I ran. I tripped and tumbled my way into the back room in complete darkness. I almost twisted my ankle as I bumped into the lunch table. I could barely hear my thoughts, and I had to remind myself to breathe. The roof of my mouth ached, as if anticipating a piercing pain. I could feel my head filling with blood and adrenaline as my dry eyes refused to blink. As I put my hand on the back door, I did the mistake of pulling instead of pushing. It took me 3 tries before thought hit me. I couldn't see the sign on the door because of the darkness. In fact, I couldn't see anything, nothing. "Angie," I wheezed, putting my phone to my ear. "You there? Hurry," she screamed. "You can make it." "How did you see it?" "The thing was huge. It just..." "No. How did you see it in incomplete darkness?" "Why, you said the lights went out. It was right there." "I can't even see the sign on the back door. How the hell did you see a spike? Look." And to add to that, how the hell do you know what it does with that spike? You've never seen the thing kill. You said you were the last one to work this shift, and the thing sure as hell didn't kill you. You're missing the point. It doesn't add up, Angie. None of this adds up. You couldn't have seen it. And there's no way for you to know how it kills. I stood there in the dark. I heard Angie panting on the other side, matching my breathing. You're lying to me, Angie. You're not trying to save me. She stopped breathing. For about a minute, it was just quiet. The call ended. A wave washed over me. I was either dead or saved. There was no in-between. I was moments from finding out. Every little sound shook me, a breeze just outside, a crackling wire, ventilation struggling to turn back on. I hadn't even noticed my hand was on the door handle. You lied to me, I said out loud. You did, I caught you. There was a sound coming from the other side of the door, a shuffling of feet. Yes, said Angie. From the other side of the door. I must have stood there for an hour until the power came back on. The people outside were gone. Angie was gone. Jada and the other managers were called in, and they seemed genuinely surprised. I've since looked it up. 100 people starting and quitting their job in a place like that isn't uncommon. People come and go all the time. The managers honestly didn't know why people disappeared, it seems. Maybe this is just how things work, or maybe there's more than one Angie out there preying on short-term workers. And the front door, there was no conspiracy there. The thing just jams sometimes. Some kind of trouble with the wiring. If I'd messed with it just a bit more, the thing could have kicked wide open. That broken door was the only thing that saved me from joining them that night. I would have walked right out as soon as Angie asked me to. I worked there for another 4 months, but just day shifts and weekends. The night shifts seemed to go off without a hitch, though. Maybe Angie and her friends moved on from an easy meal. I saved up enough money for my move to Minneapolis, but I'd never forgive myself if I didn't put this into writing. Looking back at it, it feels surreal. There are things out there, things that want us to join them. Story 3. Night shift at the Crab Shack. In the summer between my senior year of high school and the start of college, I got a job working the evening shift at my town's local Crab Shack from 2:30 until 9 o'clock. You know the place, even if you've never been there. If you've ever gone on vacation to Maine or Cape Cod or really anywhere in coastal New England, you've seen at least a dozen places like it. Ramshackle eateries along the boardwalk decorated with oars and lobster traps, and painted signs advertising standard fare, lobster bowls, clam strips, hamburgers, onion rings, fries. I'd eaten there once or twice growing up, but it was more for the tourists than the locals. For the most part, it was a pretty normal place, but there were 2 weird things about it. The first was that the cook, Raimondo, was completely blind. I know that sounds crazy, and I didn't believe it at first either. But the longer I worked there, the more I began to see how it was possible. The kitchen wasn't a big place, and Raimondo, a withered and leathery man, with a permanent grimace and a permanent slop in his posture, knew by root its every in and out. From what I could see through the little window behind the register, he kept his kitchen utensils clearly organized using a system of hooks hanging from a corkboard, and with a menu as limited as ours, he could very easily just fall into a comfortable routine. No sight required. There was a rumor he was mute, but I heard him speak once. The second weird thing about the Crab Shack was that it was open 24 hours a day. It may not sound that weird, but for one thing, even during the busy season, late June through early September, nothing out here stays open all night long, and I mean nothing. We're a tourist town, yeah. but we're not one of the big ones, just a bump on the map halfway between Gloucester and Innsmouth. Nothing here is open past midnight, let alone all night long. I only knew one of the night shift guys, Chuck Landingham, a smallish, preppy-looking kid I'd gone to high school with. Not a friend exactly, just someone you recognize when you see him in the hallway. Back in May, when I first started, he used to come in a little early and would chat a bit while I rang out my register and washed up for the night. As the summer passed, though working the night shift took a toll on Chuck, I wasn't surprised. Switching to a completely nocturnal schedule must be pretty rough for anyone. Dark circles appeared and then grew long beneath his eyes, which themselves took on a faraway look that I can't quite describe, except to say that even when he met my gaze he didn't seem to see me. Seemed instead to look through me at some invisible mystery on the other side of my head. He became distant, quiet, withdrawn, and by the end of July would stop chatting altogether. One night as I was leaving he stopped me, grabbing me by the wrist and holding me back. He looked at me expectantly and opened his mouth as if to speak, but let go without saying anything, and turned away. I was halfway out the door when I heard him muttering to himself, "I can't do it any more," he whispered in a dull, defeated tone, and then a little louder, I can't do it any more." He quit not long after that, but that was the last time I saw him. I don't know where he is now. After he left, I got a frantic call from my boss, the owner of the restaurant, asking if I could pick up Chuck's last few night shifts. After seeing the toll it had taken on him, I wasn't inclined to agree, especially because the summer was winding down and college would start in just a couple weeks for me. I was already considering giving my notice early and taking a little time to relax. The last thing I wanted was to completely retool my sleep schedule right before I started my academic career. I can't say what it was exactly that changed my mind. No, that's a lie. He offered me time and a half of the night shift rate, plus he'd still pay me for my regular shifts, even though I wouldn't be working them. He begged with me, pleaded with me to pick up the shifts, and I remember being a bit put off by his dramatics. There was actual fear in his voice, like he was scared the crab shack might have to simply close for a night or two or three. Actually, there were 3 of them, 3 overnight shifts I agreed to cover. Just 3 shifts, and I'd be making more money just that time than I had the whole previous month. I don't have a lot to say about my first night shift at the Crab Shack. The most noteworthy thing I could mention is this: nobody came. Nobody at all. I rolled in that night at 9 p.m., the same time I'd normally be leaving, and I took over for Jackie, another one of the cashiers whom I didn't know very well. After she left, I was a little surprised to glance through the little window that led into the kitchen and see that Raimondo was still there, apparently working the night shift too. Didn't that guy ever go home? The more I thought about it, the more I began to realize how unlikely it was that for the past 3 months it had always been Raimondo at the grill. Didn't the Crab Shack have any other cooks? Hey, man, I called into the kitchen sometime after 2 a.m. Is it always this dead on the overnight? No answer. I drove home the next morning as exhausted as I'd ever been. Never mind that no customers had ever materialized. Sometimes work is less exhausting than boredom. At least if I'd kept busy, there'd have been something to occupy my mind. When I got home, I crawled into bed and slept all morning, into the afternoon, straight through the day and into the evening. I have even less to say about my second night shift. This time I didn't bother to try and engage the cook in conversation, but other than that the night was exactly the same. I was exhausted from the beginning, so the hours felt even longer this time, felt even more boring and somehow even emptier. The next morning, as I climbed into bed, I remember thinking, now I understand why this shift burned Chuck out the way it had. But I was wrong. On the third night, we had a customer. Here he comes. The blind cook spoke in a deep voice, much deeper than his slight and elderly frame would suggest. He spoke up out of nowhere, and it took me by surprise as much because I'd never heard him speak before as because I had no idea what he meant. When I glanced up from my phone, I saw that the dining room was still empty. The windows against the far wall still displaying nothing but the thick blanket of night, marred only by what little stretch of pavement the anemic street lights could reach. I started to ask, but before I got any further the front door opened and in walked my first and only customer during my 3 nights on the night shift at the Crab Shack. He was a tall man, tall and broad, filling the doorway before moving forward, with a liquid grace surprising for someone of his size, letting the door slam behind him. He wore a suit with a matching short-brimmed Panama hat, both crisp and clean and of a color I'd never seen before. What I cannot describe is his face. It's not that I've forgotten. No, every detail of that night is unfortunately burned into my memory for as long as he'll live. The reason I cannot describe his face is that I found I could not look at it when I tried. Every time I try, my eyes would simply glide right past it or around it, and I would find myself staring at something just past his shoulder or over his head or down at knot in his tie or up at the cloth band around his hat. "Welcome to the Crab Shack," I greeted him in a dry whisper, the only voice I found I could muster. "Can I take your order?" He nodded slightly, even without seeing his face. That nod conveyed the presence of a smile. And then he ordered. I cannot recount his order here. I would not know how to begin, nor would I dare repeat it if I could. He ordered in a language I had never heard before, barely even register as a language, guttural and delicate and moist. His order contained noises I had never heard before in a human voice, terrible words with uncharted vowels, a language which it is my dearest hope I will never have the misfortune of hearing ever again. Worse yet, I found myself nodding as I would to any other customer, as if he had ordered a simple lobster roll or hamburger or plate of clam strips. With my eyes still on the knot of his tie, I punched a few buttons on the register. I never saw what they were. My hands moved as if on their own accord. I don't know what his total came to, and I don't know what he gave me, but it was not money. I placed it in the register, though later, when I looked again, it wasn't there. I turned and made my way over to the little window into the kitchen. "Hey, Raimondo," I called in. "This guy won't say," and then, impossibly, horribly, I found myself repeating the order back to the chef. Word for word, nose for nose, it all came right back. But as terrible as the sound of those words was, the feel of them coming out of me was even worse, like an angry school of slippery eels thrashing and fighting as they crawled up my throat, birthed into the night by my unwilling vocal cords. "You got it," Raimondo answered balefully, and then he began to cook. As I have said, I could not see far into the kitchen, and definitely not far enough to see just what it was that Raimondo placed in the deep fryer that night. I could see him holding something with both hands, something heavy by the way he struggled, and yet no bigger than a small meatloaf. The sound it made when it hit the hot oil surpassed the familiar sizzle of any seafood I'd heard fried before, not just louder, but higher in pitch and almost emotive, almost like a scream. The smell it made I will not try to describe, except to say that even now there are still nights when I awake in a sweat from dreams that consist of nothing more than that smell. Order up. I broke myself out of my reverie and saw that Raimondo had slid towards me a plate, a horrible plate holding a fried nightmare from which I should have looked away, right away, immediately away. But I couldn't. I wish I had. Instead, I will have to live the rest of my life remembering that dish, remembering that order, that sick and twisted and horrible order. The circular burst of tentacles, all deep friend and no to the same length, none originating from a common point, each sticking off in its own direction. One of them not a tentacle at all, but a finger curled up as if making a come-hither gesture, a long and gnarled fingernail peeking out through the breading, a jagged row of flat white teeth, just half a jaw, a quarter smile, no more than a slight curve ending in a single incisor, and the claws, too. Of course the claws with no arm attached, but which emerged from that dead lump of flesh like mushrooms growing in a cluster on a cadaver's cheek. Finally, and most horribly, near the center of the mass bulge, what I thought at first resembled a blister, but which I quickly realized was not but an eye, a single hazel eye dead, but staring with a preserved sadness. Did I see it blink? Did I see it blink? Did I see it turn, ever so slightly, to meet mine directly, and to stare in a silent and unheeded play for clemency? Did it look at me? Did it blink? Impossible, I tell myself. I couldn't have, I imagined it. The man, or whatever it was, but a man it was not, took the tray from me. I think he might have nodded his thanks, but I can't be sure. He carried his meal over to one of the booths and sat with his back to me. All I could see were his shoulders. When he ate, he barely moved. His arms never left his side. After he left, I worked up my nerve, and then turned once more to the little window into the kitchen. What, I started to ask before erupting into a sudden coughing fit, my throat suddenly thick with mucus. What the fuck was that? I could barely see Raimondo, just the right side of his face, just enough to notice when he smiled. The first time I'd seen any expression beyond indifference across that leathery countenance. There was no mirth within it, though it almost seemed cruel, even sadistic. All he said was, "Don't you have to go bus his tray?" I quit the next day. I haven't been back since. A week later I left for college, and as soon as I could I transferred somewhere else, somewhere further inland. I never visited home. I still haven't. Not in all the years since, and I don't think I ever will. Am more comfortable out here, where the only seafood restaurants are the occasional Red Lobster, far from the ocean where live such creatures as the one I once served. But it's not the creature itself that haunts me the most when I recall that summer before my freshman year of college. Though haunt me it does. I often dream of what it might have been before it met Raimondo's deep fryer. Nor is it the identity of the man whose face would accept not even the slightest glance, nor the nature of his relationship with my boss, the owner of the crab shack that had left the latter in such obvious mortal terror. At the thought of the restaurant closing for even a single night shift, no, the question that dominates my mind and forces me into fixation, until I tear my thoughts away back to matter more benign as and always will be. Did I see it blink? Story 4. I worked the night shift at a hospital. There was a list of strange rules. Having to spend your nights awake and your days asleep is not made for everyone. This has been a problem for me as a kid, since I never managed to fall asleep at night and ended up sleeping during class. I lost count of how many times I woke up to my teacher shouting my name and my classmates staring at me. When I turned 16, I had to start thinking about what career I wanted to pursue. Because I usually am wide awake at night, I figured I could become a security guard who works the night shift. I look intimidating as I am tall and often go to the gym, so my sole appearance would tell people not to try and mess with me. Although in fact am not as tough and strong as I look. That being said, it appears my experience in the field has led me to quite a unique job opportunity. My boss approached me and asked if I was interested in guarding a hospital for 3 days. He mentioned the job would pay exceptionally well compared to my previous jobs, as it requires experience and a trustworthy person. The opportunity of working in a hospital has not yet been offered to me during my time working here, and it seemed like quite the challenge. If I manage to fulfill the job as expected, it might also result in a salary increase. I accepted the offer wholeheartedly, as declining would be foolish. I remember my boss looking relieved upon hearing my response. Supposedly he struggled to find any other security guards willing to take on the job. You will start next week on Thursday. Make sure to be there before 10 p.m., he said, shaking my hand. I shook his hand with a huge smile on my face. Aesthetic to get started, you bet, sir. In the days leading up to the assignment, I guarded a few uneventful shifts at various places, such as a university and a McDonald's. I was happy, however, when the day of the unique opportunity arrived. Not wanting to be late, I drove to the hospital around 8 p.m. It's only a 30-minute ride, but you never know what might happen. I also figured getting to know the place wasn't such a bad idea. I mean, how am I supposed to guard a building I don't know the layout of? I didn't want to screw this up, as it pays me 3x what I usually make. It was surprisingly busy on the road, which led me to arrive at the hospital around 8:40 p.m. I got out of my car and made my way to the front door. The building seemed medieval, as it was made from bricks and had this Romanesque charm. The building wasn't big, in fact it's rather small. From the outside, it seemed the building has 3 floors with short hallways. I pushed the front door open and greeted the lady at the counter. Her smile radiated a welcoming, soothing feeling, easing me of any nerves in an instant. Hello, I believe I was hired for the night shift at this hospital. Am a bit early, though. I was supposed to start 10 p.m. What's your name, darling? She asked, maintaining her inviting smile. Jake, I replied confidently. She started typing on the PC in front of her, seemingly checking whether I was speaking the truth. I mean, you never can be too sure. Some crazy people would pretend to be a night shift security guard. Is your boss Michael? Yes, Mom. All right. One of the other security guards will be here shortly to explain the procedures. Would you like a cup of coffee in the meantime? I would love a cup of coffee. Could it be black? I asked with a grateful face. She chuckled and left to get me my coffee. A few minutes later, she returned with a cup of coffee. It tasted amazing, unlike I've tasted before. Everything seemed to fall right in line because a security guard approached me right as I finished my coffee. The security guard looked at me with skeptical eyes, judging my appearance before saying, "You must be the security guard, huh?" I didn't expect someone so young to show up for the job, but that doesn't matter if you do as I say. I got out of my chair and held out my hand to shake his hand. "Nice to meet you, sir. I assume you will be showing me around?" I asked confidently. I was always taught that it's important to look confident even though you might not feel confident, as it leaves a positive impression on the people you work for. However, the security guard in front of me, 67, and quite the physique, made it difficult for me to not feel intimidated. "Follow me," he ordered. I followed him, and we made our way to the security room. He proceeded to show me how the cameras operate and gave me a tour around the building. He told me some basic security rules, which I've heard too many times. Oh, there's one last thing he mentioned as he was leaving. "You see that paper on the desk? Read it. It contains a list of rules that you must follow. If you don't, well, no, I hope you are professional enough to take them seriously and follow them, no matter how bizarre they might seem." I looked at him dumbfounded, but swiftly regained my composure and assured him I would follow the rules. "Good luck, kid," he said as he left the room. I watched him leave as the clock position above the door told me that it was 9:30 p.m., which meant I had 30 more minutes before my shift officially started. The paper stated a total of 7 rules. Rule 1. Your shift will begin at 10 p.m. Make sure that you are inside the security room by that time. From 10:15 p.m. until 11 p.m., you are required to patrol the building to ensure that no individuals are present. If you encounter anyone, kindly ask them to leave. Rule 2. Somewhere between 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., a young woman could appear, knocking on the front door asking to see her husband. Ignore her completely and pretend she is there until she goes away. Rule 3. Ensure that the lights inside the intensive care unit remain on throughout your shift. If they happen to turn off, make your way over there and turn them back on. If you hear screaming while the lights are off, run towards the nearest bathroom and stay there until the screaming stops. Then proceed to turn the lights on. Rule 4. If there's a little girl with a teddy bear in the cafeteria, sit next to her and don't say a word. If she looks at you, walk back to the security room. If she speaks to you, talk back until she leaves. Rule 5. Around 1 a.m., go to the general ward and check on the patients. If one seems to be sitting on their bed, ask them if they're okay and do whatever they request. If they strike a conversation besides this, ignore it. Rule 6. If it starts raining, open the front door and let people in for shelter. Make sure everyone you let inside leave the building. If someone seems to be missing, you will see them on the security cameras. Do not look at them. Rule 7. If the security cameras were to turn off any time throughout the night, hide and pray for your life they won't find you. I put the paper back down on the desk and leaned back in the chair. I laughed at the sheer bizarreness of the situation. I must be getting pranked, I thought to myself. though deep down I did not believe it was a prank. This was in fact a hospital, and it seemed unlikely my boss would go to such lengths for a joke. Perhaps this was his way of seeing how much he could trust me, to see if I would follow such foolish rules. I reread the rules once again to make sure I understood them. I sure as hell was going to show my boss that he can count on me. The clock struck 10 p.m., and I turned my attention to the security cameras. With not much happening on the security cameras, and only having 15 minutes until I was supposed to patrol, I felt my attention slowly falling towards my phone. The best way to waste your time. Spending time looking at memes and stupid internet news sure does go by quickly. It felt like I barely had spent time on my phone, yet it was already 10:15 p.m. I left my cozy chair, stretched my legs, and made my way out of the security room. I figured that starting the highest floor and descending my way down would be the best course of action, so I made my way to the highest floor. Thankfully there was an elevator, so I did not have to bother using the stairs. I made my way up the highest floor and started checking all the rooms, hallways, and even the bathrooms. As I expected, nothing special happened. The thing about working the night shift as a security guard is mostly that someone must be at the location in case something happens. However, this does not mean anything will happen, making it a boring, easy way to earn money. On top of that, I get to grab coffee and snacks whenever I want. No one seemed to be on the third floor, so I decided to descend to the second floor of the building. After patrolling the second floor, I reached the conclusion I had set for myself beforehand: nothing special. I grabbed my phone to check the time and see if I needed to hurry. It was 10:30 p.m. when I finished the second floor, giving me enough time to explore the first floor. It did strike me as weird, however, that there was literally no one in the hospital. I expected a hospital to always have doctors and patients in the building, as that's the entire point of a hospital. However, every room I checked so far has been empty. If my boss was indeed trying to test me, he did not go all in on the preparations. Despite that, I proceeded to the first floor, which contained the intensive care unit, security room, front door, and cafeteria. I planned to pass through the IQ and main hall area first, so I could finish off with the cafeteria and get myself a snack. As I made my way through the ICU, I was caught by surprise when I noticed an old man, around 70 years old, standing in one of the rooms. Wonderstruck for a bit, I recalled rule number 1. If you encounter anyone, kindly ask them to leave. Suddenly, everything fell into place. I realized that my boss had likely hired an actor and allowed him inside the building to test my adherence to the rules. With a sigh, I made my way toward the man. "Excuse me, sir, you are not supposed to be here at this time. I would like to kindly ask you to leave," I firmly asserted to the old man. The old man looked at me without saying a word, appearing confused by what I had told him. "Sir, I would kindly like to ask you to leave," I repeated. He nodded his head in agreement and followed me out of the building. "Have a good night, sir," I told him as he walked away. Right before he completely vanished into the darkness, the old man unexpectedly spoke. "Be careful of the surgeon." What did he mean by that? I quickly realized my boss must have told him to say that to scare me, so I quickly disregarded it. I continued my patrol around the floor, No one else seemed to be on the first floor, so I grabbed another cup of coffee and a croissant from the cafeteria. As it was 10:53 p.m., I made my way back to the security room. Once inside, I leaned back in my chair and played some games on my phone, confident no one was in the building, and I had nothing to worry about. After playing games on my phone for a while and finally checking the time, I was surprised to see it was nearly 12 a.m. I had spent over an hour playing games on my phone. I shifted my attention to the security cameras, scanning for any anomalies. My heart skipped a beat as I noticed the lights of the ICU were switched off. I cursed at myself for not paying attention, as I had no idea how long the lights had been switched off, and the rule stated to turn them on as soon as possible. I got out of the security room to turn on the lights. As I walked towards the ICU, I froze in my steps. The sound of people screaming was deafening. I was baffled by the situation, unsure if my boss would have gone this far just to see how far I would follow the rules. The agony in the screams was noticeable and raised my anxiety. That's when I heard a door open and close, followed by footsteps making their way towards my location. Without hesitation, I bolted to the bathroom on the first floor and locked myself in one of the toilets. I tried to gather my composure and make sense of the situation I found myself in. I couldn't seem to understand how it was possible for anyone to even be in the building. Their screams of agony felt so realistic that it left no room to think this was staged by my boss. Those screams were real. Before I could fully reclaim my composure, the bathroom door swung open, and the same footsteps I heard before walked inside. I tried to stay as silent as possible, not knowing if the person had a weapon. For a second the silence was deafening, until the person started whispering a song to himself. "Welcome to the hospital, welcome to the hospital, you can come but you can't go. Welcome to the hospital, welcome to the hospital," he murmured as he knocked on the doors of every bathroom stall. I jumped when he knocked on mine, the sound noticeably louder than with the others. Through the gap beneath the door, I could see his feet on the other side, completely motionless. "Is anyone there?" he said with a deranged tone. "Open up, don't be shy," he continued. My heart pounded in my chest as I held onto the silence. I remained frozen, praying he would soon leave me alone, so I could get the hell out of here. The man persisted, knocking on the door as an attempt to gain any reaction out of me. "Come on, Jake, I need your help with something," he cried out desperately. I felt my blood turn cold at the sound of him mentioning my name. Unsure as to how he could have known it, I stayed still and did not make a sound. After a couple of minutes, he gave up and walked out of the bathroom. Right before he left, one more sentence left his mouth: "See you soon, Jake." I did not leave the bathroom for another 10 minutes until the screaming had finally stopped. I unlocked the bathroom stall I was in and slowly opened the door that led towards the main hall, making sure no one was in sight. Despite during my patrol I did not see anyone in the patient rooms, so how could there be anyone? I decided to go past the rooms one by one, to make sure I did not skip any of them. In every room were patients who seemed either extremely sick or extremely wounded. Whilst making my way throughout the hallway, the coughing sound became louder. As I slowly made my way towards the source, of course, it was in the last room. In case it was that maniac in the bathroom from before, I'd have to run the farthest. When he noticed me, he tried to speak. Wa-teed-e, or he muttered, trying to stop his coughing. For a second I was caught off guard. This guy seemed to be an actual patient. I even felt pity for him. I couldn't imagine what it'd be like for him. I quickly ran down to the cafeteria to grab a cup of water and bring it to him. As he saw me standing in the doorway, his hand signaled me to come closer and hand him the cup of water. I walked towards him and handed it to him. He drank it so fast I figured he had beaten a world record. He collapsed on his bed and thankfully stopped coughing. "Thank you," he exclaimed. As I made my way to the door and wanted to grab the handle, he spoke. "Where are you going? Come sit with me, my friend." A chill went down my spine as I heard him speak. His entire tone changed. From before and he sounded serious, I slowly turned my head back to him. Realizing I had no choice but to do what he asked, I sat down next to him on the bed. "What's up?" I tried to say confidently, but failing in doing so. "I'm not going to hurt you, son. I appreciate you helping me, you see." The surgeon stuffed a can of cinnamon down my throat, which led me to be unable to breathe. "I wanted to tell you to be careful because he's still wandering the building." "He stuffed cinnamon down your throat?" I asked in disbelief. That's when I remembered what the old man from before had said, "Be careful of the surgeon." "Yes, he did. I wanted to warn you. This seems to be your first time here. I figured you'd like to know there's a maniac inside the building. If you do what the rules say, kid, you'll be fine." I looked at him with fright. After taking a deep breath and standing up, I thanked him and made my way out the room. Thankfully, he did not ask me to come back. I made my way to the security room. My pace increased when I heard something falling on the 3rd floor. In no multiverse would I have gone upstairs to check what was going on there. If I follow the rules, I'd be fine. I grabbed the door handle of the security room and closed it as soon as I was inside. A wave of relief crashed over me as I once again felt safe. When I looked at the clock above the door, it indicated the time was 1:53 a.m. I sat down in the chair and once again read the sheet of paper. That is when she started giggling, covering her mouth with one hand, whilst still holding her teddy bear with the other. "You forgot the rules," she said in a frightening and teasing tone. I looked at her confused, thinking I had remembered them correctly. She could see the panic look in my eyes, enjoying the sight of it. "Want to play hide and seek?" she excitedly asked. "I'll count to 60, and then we will look for you." I did not bother to ask who he was. She looked at me like a kid looks at candy in a candy store. I ran to the security room, leaving my coffee next to the little girl. As I ran away, I could hear her counting. "If she looks at you, walk back to the security room. If she speaks to you, talk back until she leaves." My throat turned dry as I realized my mistake. As I realized I had broken one of the rules, I remembered her mentioning hide and seek. That's when suddenly all the security cameras turned off. Overtaken by adrenaline, it felt like my body was moving on its own. I reached for the front door and frantically tried to open it. The door didn't budge, no matter how hard I kicked. I stood on the bed to get closer to the ceiling and hopefully pull myself up. I accidentally kicked the photo from the nightstand next to the bed. The sound of it hitting the ground echoed throughout the entire building. I heard that, She screamed as I heard her running towards my location. Completely freaked out and realizing I had to be quick, I jumped as high as I could and held onto the ceiling, pulling myself up as fast as I could. Though I did not know exactly where she was, I figured she would be upstairs. I slowly made my way downstairs, making sure no one was there. As I heard her shoes touching the floor above me, I knew I was safe to walk on the first floor for a while. This seemed to be a horrible conclusion, because the moment I turned the corner, I could see the silhouette of a man standing near the ICU. I could see his face turn to me. I quickly jumped behind the wall, hoping he had not seen me. "What is a patient of mine doing out of his room so late?" the man asked. Realizing I did not have long before he would be here, I had two options. My first option was to go back upstairs and hope I would not encounter the girl, and maybe find a hiding spot there. The second option was to run to the bathroom once again in hopes I'd be safe there. I didn't like either of those options, as I felt either of them would lead to me getting caught. "Come on now, I need to inspect your organs," the man proclaimed as I heard him open the bathroom door. His voice sounded familiar, but at first I did not seem to understand why. That was until he finished searching the bathroom. "You were smart enough to hide somewhere else this time. I'm impressed you are not as stupid as you look," he said as I realized who he was. The guy sounded exactly like the maniac I had encountered before. My blood froze to the fact that he knew where I was all along. He opened the janitor closet and looked around for a bit, but decided it was too small for someone to hide in. So he closed it soon after, leaving me in utter darkness, horrified to do anything. I stayed in there for the rest of the night, not getting out until I knew it was completely safe. I could hear a drill, followed by a man screaming in agony. The man, who I assumed was the surgeon, laughed maniacally. I grabbed my phone to see how long I had left until the nightmare was over. 5:45 a.m. Only 15 minutes left until the staff of the hospital would come in for their daily shift. I just had to hold on for a little bit longer. "It's over. You can come out now." I got back on my feet and walked back into the hallway. The hospital looks completely different during the day than it does at night. Instead of being unsettling, it seemed like a nice place. I thanked the janitor for his kindness and got the hell out of that place. I drove home and collapsed on my bed. I still could not comprehend what I had witnessed. It all felt like a fever dream. I told my boss I was sick and did not bother to answer his phone calls. After a week, I returned to my regular, uneventful shifts. Though the boredom might be horrible, I do not mind it at all. In the end, anything is better than having to spend the night in that hospital. Story 5. The last time I ever worked a midnight shift. Someone once told me that shift work will take years off your life. I don't know if that's true or if there's any science behind it, but I still believe it. If you've never worked shifts, it's hell. The schedule changes every week. You're in when you're in, and you adjust your life around that. Maybe it might be more manageable at a job with reasonable hours. Something at a restaurant or in retail. Sure, it's still a shit deal, but it's a functional shit deal. Warehouses and factories, though, well, that's another goddamn story altogether. What the hell, I needed the money and couldn't afford to be picky. All the warehouses and factories in my area hire through temp agencies. Any job you got wasn't guaranteed to be yours tomorrow. But there was always that hope of getting hired on. Maybe if you worked hard enough, maybe if you showed you were committed and willing to take the shit gigs nobody else wanted, they'd see you as worth their time. Nowadays, I know better. Temp agencies, factories, and warehouses are all full of shit. Sure, maybe there's some legitimately good ones out there, but I'm willing to bet that those are rare. The way I see it, little white lies like that are a hell of a lot better than explaining to them the main reason why I'll never work another night shift in my life. See, it's more than just the fact that the hours are shit and that it'll slowly kill you. It's a lot more than that. I don't go out at night. Period. I haven't done so in about 5 or 6 years. Ever since that night at Jefferson's, that was the last night shift I ever worked. It was February, which in my part of the world is usually a shitshow. From November to around mid-January, winter is fairly mild where I live. But come February, all fucking bets are off. That's when the blizzards hit, and they always hit hard. I've had to physically dig my car out of the goddamn snow to get to work before and trudge through snow drifts almost knee-deep just to walk through the parking lot of whatever warehouse I was stuck at for the day. It's not fun. Anyways, it was February, and the news was calling for a bitch of a snowstorm that night. Freezing rain, sleet, the whole 9 miserable yards. It sounded bad, and when I got the call about a late night shift available at Jefferson's, I was understandably not too thrilled by the idea of going out in what was shaping up to be the worst storm of the year. That said, I still had bills to pay. I needed the work. So, like it or not, I said I'd be happy to take the midnight shift at Jefferson's. To be fair to the place, Jefferson's really wasn't all that bad. It was a little more laid back than some of the warehouses I'd worked in before, and I had some friends there. My buddy Ace was working there at the time. Ace was a good guy. Hell, Ace was probably one of the nicest guys I knew. I'd known him ever since I was a kid, and though he wasn't that much older than me, I guess I still kinda looked up to him a bit, like an older brother or something. Back after my dad passed, he'd been the one who was there for me. He was the kind of guy who couldn't stand to see a person hurting, and when he saw someone having a rough time, he'd do everything in his power to make it better. I always admired that about him. I really couldn't argue with his logic. I didn't know if he'd be on the midnight shift too, but I'll be honest, I was kinda hoping he would be. I would have liked to see a friendly face. Some of them were familiar faces. I'd worked with them before, although we weren't exactly friends. And I watched as the two left the locker area together. Round the same time they did, I spotted another familiar face coming in through the door, the one man I'd been hoping to see. Ace's eyes just lit right up when he saw me. He broke into a massive grin as he came over to clap me on the shoulder. He hit me hard enough to make my bones rattle, although I knew he didn't mean anything by it. The one bad thing I could say about Ace is that sometimes he didn't know his own strength. Mitch, long time no see. Man, how have you been? Can't complain, man. They roped you into this too, huh? Ace shrugged. Gotta pay the bills somehow, no? He headed off to one of the lockers and left his phone and wallet inside. Then he grabbed a safety vest and headed out onto the floor. I followed behind him, shooting the shit as we walked. Most of the other guys were already assembled, waiting for the supervisor to give us our marching orders. I recognized the supervisor on duty that night, a guy by the name of Rob Alden, and takes a sadistic delight in watching you drink it just to be nice. Anyways, Rob Alden was that kind of Rob. The only thing that set him apart was the fact that he always seemed to have a cough. The guy couldn't get through a fucking sentence without coughing or clearing his throat in the most annoying way possible. Herk, 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 herk. It sounded like a fake cough. It's probably a shallow reason not to like a guy, but it got on my goddamn nerves. He was shooting the shit with some of the guys when Ace and I joined the group, and once he noticed everyone was accounted for, he started assigning everyone off. Alrighty, well, we've got ourselves a busy night here, guys, so let's get to it. You guys, he gestured to a small group of about 4 guys clustered together. He'll get you unpacking and wrapping the skids, herk, 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 herk. And you guys, he gestured to myself, Ace, Nathan, and Matt along with one other guy. We've got some trucks we need unloaded. Alan, you've got the forklift. The leftover guy, whose name was apparently Alan, just nodded and went to get started. Rob went with the packing team to micromanage them while me, Ace, and the rest of the offloading team headed down to the loading bay to do our thing. Warehouse work is boring as shit, and once we'd gotten to work, I can't say it was particularly interesting. I suppose unloading a truck makes the day go fast. At least, I imagine we worked about 3 or so hours getting through the first truck. Most of what was inside looked like soap or mouthwash or something. I didn't take too close of a look at it. We were near the end of the truck, and Ace sat down on a pile of skids for a moment to rest. I remember he said, "Shit, man, you hear that wind?" "Fucking crazy," man, Ace murmured. "Wonder how bad it is out there now," Matt said, stepping out of the truck. "Think we'd catch hell if we took a look." Ace just shrugged. "The fuck are they gonna do?" But through all that snow, we could barely even see the truck we were unloading. We stared into the storm, and Ace let out a whistle of awe. "Fuck me," he said. "Welp, guess we're sleeping here. Anyone bring a blanket?" I laughed, although part of me wondered if it would still be this bad at the end of my shift. Even if it wasn't, my car was probably going to be fucking buried. "That's insane," I heard Nathan say before he trailed off. Ace went to close the door only to stop when Nathan spoke up again. "Wait, is that a person out there? Someone out there?" In this, Ace's brow furrowed. He stared out into the storm, only for his eyes to widen little bit when he saw what Nathan saw. "Holy shit, there is." It took me a moment to see it too, but once I knew where to look, it was hard to miss him. It was faint, but I could see the shape of a man walking through our parking lot. "The hell is he doing out there?" Matt asked. "Has got to be freezing. Has not one of us?" "I don't think," I said. "Maybe a vagrant or something." I could see Ace grimace slightly. I figure he had to have been thinking the same thing. Who else would be wandering around a snowstorm at night in this part of town? I suppose what Ace did next was the only thing Ace possibly could have done, given his nature. Honestly, it's probably what any decent person would have done. I don't know. I suppose on paper it might be easy to say that we should have just closed the door and left the guy in the snowstorm alone, but that wasn't in Ace's nature. He couldn't just leave well enough alone. He had to help out. "Hey," he called, cupping his hands to his mouth. "Hey, come over here. Come on over here." None of us questioned what he was doing. Of course, I knew Ace just wanted to try and help. Maybe Matt and Nathan did to, and once they started calling out to the stranger in the snow. They did as well. "Hey, come on over here." The man in the snow stopped and looked over towards us. I doubt he could clearly see us through the snow, but I know he heard our voices. "Come on over here." Slowly the figure began to approach the door, shuffling towards us at a slow pace. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Rob coming up to investigate what was going on. "There's a guy out there," I said before he could even ask. "Someone's out in the storm." Rob just pushed past me to see for himself. Then he looked over at me. "Can you grab some coffee from the break room? Something hot," he said. "That guy's got to be freezing his ass off." I really didn't need to be told twice. I took one last look at the stranger outside before turning and jogging down towards the break room. "Jesus fucking Christ," I heard someone yell, and it was a moment before I saw what they'd already seen. As the door started to close, something crawled under it. I was too far away to get a good look at it. 1 minute, he was trying to restrain it. The next, he was on the ground, and I could hear his screams, and smashed him against the wall so violently he left a smear of blood behind. I could hear the crunch of his bones from all the way over by the break room. I watched as the packing team recoiled at the sight of whatever it was and hightailed it in the other direction. The man who had coming from the snow bolted after them on all fours. I could hear the sound of the forklift going somewhere in the warehouse, followed by a sudden crash. I could hear the terrified cries of men in their final moments. It felt like it lasted hours, but in all honesty, it couldn't have lasted more than a few minutes. After the crash of the forklift, I could hear distant screams. I could hear the sound of bodies being thrown around, and then nothing. Just a pregnant silence that settled in. Eventually, the lights went out. They were activated by motion, so if a part of the warehouse was empty, there was no need to keep them on. Once they were out, that's when I decided to steal a peek out the window just to see if maybe that thing had left. I could see a trail of blood leading into a row of backed skids, and I knew I didn't want to see what was at the end of it. Everyone was dead, everyone but me. I listened as they grew louder and louder, and then fainter. He was going away. I kept still. I kept my mouth shut. The shuffling footsteps kept getting further away until they became a whisper, drowned out by the howling of the wind. I'd never been more scared in my entire life. When the lights went out again, I crawled along the floor towards the bathroom and closed the door as quietly as I could. I locked it and left the lights off. I didn't move until morning. The next shift found me in there, and I damn near punched out the guy who tried to open the door. It took a couple of guys to keep me from thrashing and screaming before I calmed down and realized I was safe. Everything that happened next is a blur. The police interviews, the suspect lineup, it's all hazy in my memory. It all blurs together like a dream. Ace, Rob, Nathan, Matt, Alan, and the other guys, they were all dead. Every single last one of them. Something had come in and just killed them. I saw some of the bodies on the way out. Most of them had been covered up, but I'm pretty sure they hadn't gotten to Nathan yet. At least I think it used to be Nathan. There wasn't a lot left for me to get a positive ID on the body, whoever it was. It's been in my nightmares ever since. I don't exactly have the credentials to work most other places, and I don't have the time or money to get those credentials, so back to the temp agencies I went. It is what it is. I live with it. Ace probably would have found a silver lining to all this. That's just how he was. But unfortunately, and not Ace, God knows, I miss him every day, though sometimes I wonder if I made the wrong call, hiding like a chicken shit when that thing turned violet. Maybe if I'd rushed in and tried to help Rob pull it off of him, someone other than me would still be alive, or maybe it would have killed me just as easily as it killed everyone else. Maybe Ace would have preferred I survive. I dunno. I can't speak for the dead. In the end, I don't really think it matters whether or not I survived. They never identified the man responsible for what happened that night. Assuming, of course, that it even was a man. I don't know if a human would even be capable of doing that to other people. But what do I know? All the questions from the police, all the digging they didn't turn up a damn thing, though. The stranger from the snowstorm vanished into the night, and as far as I can tell, he never came back. Even if I wanted revenge or closure, I wouldn't even know where to start. I just don't take night shifts anymore, and I don't go out after dark. It's probably unlikely that I'll ever come across that man again. But if I somehow do, well, I'd rather not push my luck.